Let the past be a teacher, not a prison. Liam walked through the temple gates, his mind in a whirlwind, each step weighed down by the ghosts of his past. He had once been a man of great ambition, a young businessman whose sharp mind and ruthless drive had earned him wealth beyond measure. He had everything he had ever wanted: fame, power, and the luxury that came with his success. But it all came crashing down, as it always does when one builds on shaky foundations. His greed had clouded his judgment, his ego had driven away those who once loved him, and his ambition had led him down a path of selfishness that tore apart the very life he had built. He had lost everything, and now here he was, standing at the gates of a temple, seeking something he could not name. Peace, redemption, or simply a moment of silence from the torment that gnawed at him every day. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, the soft murmur of chanting monks echoing in the distance. Liam wasn't sure why he had come here. The world felt so distant, and he had grown tired of fighting the inner storms that raged in his heart. It was as if the weight of his past mistakes had chained him to the ground, leaving him unable to move forward. He couldn't escape the memories, couldn't erase the regret that gnawed at him like a relentless tide. As he wandered through the temple grounds, he noticed an old monk sitting alone on a stone bench, his posture straight and his eyes closed in deep meditation. The monk seemed to radiate a quiet strength, as though he had found the answers to questions Liam hadn't even known how to ask. Liam approached cautiously, unsure of what to say. But the monk opened his eyes, as if sensing his presence, and smiled softly. "You seem troubled, young man," the monk said, his voice gentle but firm, as though it had the power to calm the very winds themselves. "What brings you here?" Liam hesitated. How could he explain to this stranger the weight of his regrets, the crushing burden of his past? I've made so many mistakes," he confessed, his voice trembling. "I had everything, but I lost it all. Now I can't move on. My past is all I have left, and it's holding me prisoner." The monk listened intently, his expression calm, yet full of understanding. He did not offer sympathy, nor did he judge. He simply nodded as though he had heard these words many times before. "The past can indeed be a prison," the monk said slowly, his gaze distant, but only if you allow it to be. "It is not the past that binds us, but the way we choose to carry it." Liam felt a flicker of hope stir in his chest, but he was skeptical. "How can I let go of something that has defined me for so long? Every time I try, the weight only grows heavier." The monk stood up, his movements graceful, and led Liam to a quiet corner of the temple. "Come sit with me," he said, "and I will tell you something that may help you understand." They sat together, facing a small pond where lotus flowers bloomed, their petals glowing in the sunlight. The monk began to speak in a soft, steady voice. "Do you see the lotus?" he asked. "It grows from the mud at the bottom of this pond, reaching upward toward the light. The mud does not define the lotus. It is merely the ground from which it grows. In the same way, the past is not who you are, Liam. It is simply the soil from which you have risen." Liam listened intently, trying to grasp the meaning behind the monk's words. "But the mud, the mistakes, they still stick to me. I can't seem to shake them off." The monk's eyes twinkled as he spoke again. "Yes, but mud can also be washed away. Just as the lotus must endure the weight of the water to rise above it, you too must face your past, not with regret, but with understanding. The past is your teacher, Liam. It is not your prison." Liam's heart raced as he processed the monk's words. Could it really be that simple? Could he truly release the grip of regret that had held him for so long? "The past is a teacher, not a jailer," the monk continued. "When we learn from it, we free ourselves. But when we let it define us, we remain trapped. You must forgive yourself, Liam. Not because your mistakes don't matter, but because holding on to them only keeps you from moving forward." Liam closed his eyes, feeling the weight in his chest begin to loosen, just a little. He thought of his past, the moments he had spent regretting his decisions, wishing he could turn back time. But the truth was he couldn't. No one could. And yet there was something freeing in that realization. "Forgiving myself," Liam whispered, tasting the words as if they were foreign. "I don't know if I can do that. How do I let go of the pain?" The monk's smile softened. "By accepting it. Understand that pain, regret, and failure are not your enemies. They are your teachers, shaping you, guiding you toward who you are meant to be. Once you accept that, once you see the lessons in the pain, you will be free." Liam sat in silence, contemplating the monk's words. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of peace he hadn't known in so long. He wasn't sure how long it would take or what the future held, but he knew one thing: the past was no longer his prison. As they stood to leave, the monk placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Remember this," he said. "The lotus does not look back at the mud from which it rose. It simply grows toward the light. Let your past be your teacher, not your prison." With that, Liam walked away from the temple, his steps lighter than they had been in years. He had a long journey ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to walk it. Liam walked slowly through the temple grounds, his mind still swirling with the monk's words. He could feel the weight of his past lifting, even if just a little. For the first time in what felt like ages, the world seemed a bit brighter, a little more bearable. He had spent so many years consumed by regret, trying to outrun the mistakes that had haunted him. But now, the monk's words echoed in his heart. The past is a teacher, not a prison. As Liam left the temple behind, he made his way back to the life he had tried so desperately to escape. The world outside was bustling, chaotic, and relentless, but Liam no longer saw it the same way. The sharp edge of his pain had dulled, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to hide from his past. Days passed, and Liam began to revisit the places that once held so much shame. He stood in front of the abandoned office building where he had once worked tirelessly, obsessed with success at any cost. The glass doors, once a symbol of his ambition, now seemed like a reminder of the person he had been. A person driven solely by ego, a person who had lost everything, including his sense of self. He walked into the building, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The faces of former colleagues, now long gone, seemed to linger in the air. He could almost hear their laughter, their conversations, reminders of a time when he had thought the world owed him everything. He found his old office, the one he had once spent countless nights in, working alone in the silence, driven by the fear of losing it all. But now, as he sat at the desk, where his past had been built, it didn't feel like failure anymore. It felt like a lesson. He closed his eyes, recalling the monk's voice. "Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice." Liam realized something profound. His past, the mistakes he had made, the people he had hurt, it wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was the soil that had nurtured his growth. It was his teacher. He had to face it, not run from it, because only then could he truly heal. The next few weeks were filled with reflection and change. Liam took the monk's advice to heart and began to rebuild, not just his business, but his life. He reached out to those he had wronged, offering apologies where he could, trying to make amends for the hurt he had caused. Some accepted, some did not. But it didn't matter. He wasn't doing it for them. He was doing it for himself. One evening, Liam visited a friend he had once betrayed, Sarah. She had been his closest confidant, someone he had trusted implicitly. But when the money and the power had come into his life, he had distanced himself from her, using her as a stepping stone to climb higher. He had promised her so much, only to abandon her when things went wrong. Standing outside her door, Liam hesitated, unsure if she would even want to see him. He had hurt her deeply, and the guilt was overwhelming. But he remembered the monk's words. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the burden. He rang the bell. When Sarah opened the door, there was a moment of silence. Her eyes searched his face, trying to make sense of the man standing in front of her. He had changed. That much was obvious. But the past still lingered in the air between them. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Liam said quietly. "For everything. For the lies, for the betrayal, for hurting you. I can't undo what I did. But I want you to know that I'm not that person anymore. I'm trying to change." Sarah stood still, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had every right to be angry, to hate him. But as she listened to his words, something inside her softened. She had lived with the pain for so long, but hearing him speak, hearing the sincerity in his voice, it made her wonder if forgiveness was possible. Liam nodded, relief washing over him. He didn't expect her to forgive him right away, and maybe she never would. But in that moment, he realized that he didn't need to carry the weight of his mistakes anymore. His past was no longer a prison. It was a part of him, but it no longer controlled him. As he walked away from Sarah's door that night, Liam felt a sense of peace he had never known. He had faced his past, owned his mistakes, and started the process of healing. But there was still much to do. The monk had been right. True change would take time, but Liam was ready. He was no longer the man who ran from his mistakes. He was the man who faced them, learned from them, and moved forward with the knowledge that he could build a better future. He had come to understand that the past was not a place to dwell. It was a lesson to be learned from, a guide to help him become a better person. And as he moved forward, step by step, he knew that the light of his future would shine brighter than the shadows of his past. Liam stood at the edge of a quiet river, the moonlight casting a soft glow over the still water. His journey had brought him to a place of peace, yet he knew there was still much more to learn, much more to do. He had faced his past, made amends where he could, and begun to understand the lessons embedded in his mistakes. But the final step, true healing, was not just about reconciling with others. It was about reconciling with himself. The monk's words echoed in his mind. The past is not a prison. It is a teacher. He had learned that lesson, but it had taken time, patience, and humility. He had forgiven others, and now it was time to forgive himself. But how could he do that? How could he truly release the guilt, the shame, the weight of the man he had been? It seemed almost impossible. Yet, as he stood there by the river, looking out at the reflection of the stars, something in his heart shifted. He had been carrying this burden for so long, but perhaps it was time to lay it down. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, focusing on the stillness around him. The sound of the water flowing, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the quiet rhythm of nature, everything felt so simple, so peaceful. For the first time, Liam allowed himself to be fully present, to let go of the constant worrying about the future and regretting the past. He had always been looking ahead, chasing success, or looking back, haunted by what he had lost. But here, in this moment, he realized that true peace could only be found in the present. Liam sat down on the riverbank, his thoughts quieting. He could feel the weight of his past still there, but it didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a chapter in a book, a chapter that had shaped him, yes, but one that was behind him now. And as the river flowed, it reminded him that life moves forward, relentlessly, and that he, too, could move forward. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah, the woman he had betrayed so long ago. He had been afraid to contact her after their conversation, unsure of what she might say. But as he read her message, he felt a sense of warmth flood his chest. "I've been thinking about what you said," she wrote. "I can't say that everything is healed, but I see the changes in you. Maybe we could start over, in some way. Maybe we could be friends again." Liam's heart swelled with gratitude. He hadn't expected this. The road to forgiveness was never easy, and he knew that it would take time to rebuild the trust he had shattered. But this was a sign that change was possible, that healing was possible. As he typed his response, a deep sense of peace settled over him. He wasn't perfect. He would never be perfect. But he had learned something priceless on this journey. It wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about owning them, learning from them, and using them to become a better person. He didn't need to keep running from his past. He could accept it, learn from it, and grow beyond it. The next day, Liam returned to his office. This time, it was different. He walked in with his head held high, not because he was proud of his past mistakes, but because he had made peace with them. He was no longer driven by fear or shame, but by the desire to live with integrity, to rebuild what he had lost, not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of his relationships and his sense of self-worth. Liam began to invest in his community, supporting causes that mattered to him, using his skills and resources to help others. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He had nothing left to prove except to himself. And with every small step forward, he felt lighter, more at peace with who he was and who he was becoming. One day, he returned to the temple where he had met the monk. This time he wasn't seeking answers. He had come to express his gratitude. The monk smiled when he saw Liam. "You've returned," the monk said gently. "Tell me, what have you learned?" Liam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his journey in his words. "I've learned that the past is a teacher, not a prison, and that forgiveness isn't just for others, it's for yourself too." The monk nodded, his eyes twinkling with quiet approval. "And what of the future?" "The future," Liam smiled. "The future will take care of itself. I'm no longer afraid of it. I'm just here present, ready to embrace whatever comes next." The monk's gaze softened. "That is all you can do, and that is enough." As Liam left the temple, he felt a deep sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He was no longer shackled by the weight of his mistakes, no longer trapped in the prison of regret. He had learned that the past was not his enemy, but his greatest teacher. And with that wisdom, he was free.